Well, welcome everyone for joining us this morning for our Understanding the Airports. So before we get started, I'm just going to do a quick little overview of AirTAP. If you're not familiar with us, you'll get a little bit more familiar today. So this session is part of our winter webinar series. And this workshop series is sponsored by MnDOT's Office of Aeronautics and administered by the Airport Technical Assistance Program, also known as AirTAP. We are located at the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota. So a little bit about AirTAP. AirTAP began in 2000. It was the first of its kind in the nation, offering practical yet specialized training and resources across the state for those who operate, maintain, and administer Minnesota's public use airports. Minnesota's general aviation personnel across the state have had access to targeted information and training to reduce costs and improve the safety, quality, and the overall efficiency of airport operations. AirTAP has also helped airport staff build a community network for exchanging best practices and learning from one another. Oops. There we go. So a few things about AirTAP. We offer a variety of education and training, including these webinars we've been putting on the last couple of years, and as well as annual events like the Airports Conference. We also provide technical assistance. We have access to many experts that we can share with the community. And we also have resources and other printed materials on our website. And as I mentioned, this is a part of a webinar series. Last month, we had one about understanding the grant process. And coming in late February, early March, we'll be having another one. The topic will be understanding the airport and the airport manager's role. So this will be a panel discussion with some airport managers. All these sessions are being recorded and made available through our website, which is airtap.umn.edu. And that's all I have for the intro. So now I'm handing it over to I should have introduced myself first. I'm so sorry, I forgot. My name is Catherine Stanley. I am the AirTAP program coordinator. So I'm going to hand it over to Casey Carlson. He is MnDOT's airport lighting coordinator, and he will be providing today's presentation. And just so you know, you can start entering questions into the chat right along the bottom. There's a big chat feature. We may answer them along the way if it pertains to what he just said. Otherwise, at the end, we will get to all the questions that have been submitted. So Casey, go ahead.
Hey crew, Casey Carlson here. Glad to be with you this morning. I'm bringing some content back that some of you may have seen if you were here last year. But we want to lay down a baseline for anybody that's new. So I have taken, extrapolated some of last year's info and added some new stuff for this year. So I hope you find it informational. With that, I bid you good morning, and I will share my screen here. See if we can get rocking and rolling. Catherine, let me know if I'm sharing the right screen. Okay, here we go. Okay, have you got me up there?
It's good, yeah.
Awesome, perfect. Okay, well, I will get right into it. Slide number 2, let's see. Just got a little welcome message here. I have to move my Zoom window. Okay, today I'll take some time to give an overview of airport lighting at our Minnesota airports. And I've been able to meet or speak with many of you over this past year. It's been a rewarding experience working in aeronautics. I'm glad to have made the migration here from my previous role at MnDOT. So since March, I've had the opportunity to visit many of our Minnesota airports. So many unique communities, from the giant boot of Red Wing to the lutefisk capital of the world in Madison, Minnesota, and from Crane Lake Seaplane Base at the Canadian border all the way to the Spam Museum in Austin, Minnesota. It's been awesome to see our airport infrastructure firsthand, and I'm just excited to continue to serve in this role. And yesterday I gave this similar presentation to one of our other groups, and I asked if anybody had sampled any lutefisk over the Christmas holiday, and I did not get very many responses, but please feel free to add that in the chat if you had some lutefisk over your Christmas holiday. Moving on. Okay, what are we planning to cover today? Types of lighting that we have out at our runways. Types of airports and lighting requirements from visual to intermediate and key airports. The importance of a good maintenance plan. And this year I've added a fixture spotlight on PAPIs. So if any of you are interested in seeing a little more of a deep dive, hang in there. That'll be towards the end. Let's see, I want to make sure, okay, I spoke about that. Please make sure to type your questions into the chat bar, as Catherine said. And thanks again for your attention this year. Okay, here's some pictures of our airport lighting systems. Some of these fixtures you've seen out on the airfields. Your edge lights, happy lights up in the top right corner there. Excuse my coffee drink. Runway and identifier lights, reels. And then in the bottom right corner, you have some of those MULSRs, MULSFs. So sometimes these acronyms can be a little bit intimidating. If you sound out what that MULSR and MULSF is, it's really it's not that technical, with it just being a medium approach lighting system. So the R and the F on a MULSR or MULSF are referring to the amount of flashers that are leading into that array, that approach lighting system. So that's kind of a brief overview of what you might see for airport lighting out on our site. Oh, I wanted to add that the purpose for those MULSRs, MULSFs, of course, are to reduce the required visibilities needed to land during inclement weather. Whereas a runway edge light is showing you just the perimeter of your runway itself, your landing surface. Those MULSRs and MULSFs are meant to gain your attention if you're a pilot and you're coming in towards a airport and it's foggy or low vis conditions from snow. That would be the purpose of our MULSRs and MULSFs, to lead us into where we're trying to get to. We'll talk more about that coming up. Whether it be PAPI lights or simple edge lights, how would somebody new to the industry know which airports have which types of lights? And how can we differentiate between key, intermediate, and landing strip type of airport? A couple pictures there. MSP, of course, on the right is at the extreme of one of our state's largest, well, it is our state's largest airports. Off to the left, we just have a landing strip from a private airport in the Lakes area, Park Rapids area. So.
How come I can't get my
Categorizing our airports into the three groups. We have key airports, intermediate airports, and our landing strips. So if you can see in the illustration over there, our key airports are going to have an ILS, generally, as your precision instrument approach. So think of our larger airports around the state. They're the ones that would generally have an ILS. Intermediate is the most common type of airfield that we have across the state, with a vertically guided instrument approach. So we may have GPS, RNAV there, if you guys are familiar with those terms. And then, of course, the visual approach, like that grass landing strip in the previous slide. So let's go through some of our smaller scale airports. What would we expect to see there? Maybe lit or unlit. Lighted runways consist of runway edge lighting and end of runway lights. Generally, that's going to be your, I would say generally speaking, there's 8 on the end of each runway, split into 2 groups of 4. And the globes are positioned appropriately so that you can see if it would be green or red, depending on what direction that you're facing. the end of that runway. If an airport has lighting for nighttime operations and wants to be advertised for night operations or charted, they will need to have their runway lighting energized from dusk to dawn on low intensity, according to Minnesota administrative rules. So if you are driving by a airport that you know has airport lighting, and you go by at night and you don't see it on, it should be on, and that's something that we would like to know about so that we can help correct that. Our pilots are expecting them to be on, of course. Lit runways also require a rotating beacon and a lighted wind cone, according to the advisory circular 150/5300. And the runway edge lighting will consist of lurls or murls, with the latter being the more prevalent. Our lurls are going to be low intensity runway lights as opposed to medium intensity. And a lot of the lurls that I've seen are what we refer to as a stake light. So it's just a long stake driven into the ground with a hub on top and direct wiring connections. So direct buried wiring connections. Whereas a murl is where we jump up into the constant current circuit and generally conduit running between the lighting. Okay, yep, here's where I was foreshadowing to a stake being driven in the ground, direct bury T-taps. Okay, oh, I should mention too that if you are an airport that is used to, or if you are a pilot that's used to flying into those intermediates, you're going to be used to the 3 clicks, bringing up your low, medium, and high. Whereas on these Lurl, low intensity runway light airports, you're only going to have the 1 setting. So something to be aware of. And from the troubleshooting standpoint of it, a Lurl is going to have a 120 volt, more of a conventional circuit that somebody could relate more to wiring to their home, to a receptacle. It's a 120 volt circuit with a hot and a neutral. When we jump up into those Murls, that's where we get into the safety factor of a regulator and a constant current circuit. And there's a lot more, should I say, safety concerns in dealing with that. So you kind of want to have a good you do want to have a good understanding of it before you get your hands anywhere near that stuff for safety's sake. Our intermediate airports, so everything we saw on the previous sized airport, plus some additional things here. It's our most common type of airport, with 63% being an intermediate. 24-hour 100 low-level avgas is desirable. So generally we'll see that on these type of airports. Paved and at least 1 instrument approach. And in addition to all the lighting systems at a visual only strip, there is an expectation that the intermediate airports will have PAPIs and reels, if you remember those from the beginning of our slideshow. We'll speak more about those coming up. Key airports, 5,000 or more feet of pavement, designed for heavier aircraft. I was stating in yesterday's presentation that I always think of a runway landing surface just needing to be a certain width and a certain length to get those larger aircraft in there, because they need more room to take off and land. But one of the things that I forget about is that you've also got to have better or thicker materials to handle the weight of that aircraft as it's touching down. Key Airport has all the systems of that intermediate, and there's an expectations that the Murls will be upgraded to Hurls on the runways associated with ILS. So some of our key airports will have a crosswind runway that is on the airport to supplement if aircraft come in and they're not going to use the main runway. So that main runway is going to have those high intensity runway lights, and your crosswind might just have medium intensity runway lights. The distinction between the two for a pilot's perspective, just being that high intensity is going to have 5 click settings for the pilot controlled lighting. So if you were a pilot coming in, you would have 2 additional intensity levels aside from your low, medium, and high that you would see with your MERLs. Key airports may also have an additional lighting approach system of some kind, like a MALS-F or a MALS-R, which we spoke about earlier. I think if I remember the acronym, medium approach lighting system, and that's flashing. So you have, on a MALS-F, you're gonna have 3 flashers, and on a MALS-R, the R on the end is for, I believe, runway alignment indicator lights. So there's a rail on it, and not to be confused with a reel. So a couple extra flashers on that MALS-R is the main difference. Okay, if you have more questions on the state policy, look at the SASP that we refer to in our office as the SASP. State Aviation Systems Plan is a good resource for what types of lighting that you would expect out at our different types of airports. This can be an important tool for airport managers and city staff to understand the state aviation policy regarding procurement of funding for repairs and additions. So if you're thinking, hey, I should be into a different class of airport than what I am in, the SAS would be a great resource to assist you in understanding what certain airports should be expected to have and what other airports would be expected to have. And here I've just showcased our site to show where you would go if you were going to want to get to that SASP. So if you look up in Aviation A to Z on that blue tab there and just scroll down to SASP, you could find it that way. Also over here in planning and zoning, the 3rd bullet down, that link would bring you to the State Aviation System Plan. But I want to encourage folks to go to our website and just nose around. It's a good opportunity to go there looking for a certain piece of information and end up finding something that was an information that could help you with a question you may have had earlier or something related to what you're looking for. So switching gears from our site, let's talk a little bit about a maintenance plan. So why do we have to maintain all these systems? What's the risk if we just use them until they no longer function in a use to fail scenario, use until failure? Well, we want to keep our systems operating as well as possible for safety's sake. Pilots use these, bumped ahead a slide there. Pilots use these visual aids to assist in their travel throughout the airport, especially at night. And if a pilot controlled lighting system is unusable, it may create hazards and should be noted out immediately. Skipped assessments of lighting issues tend to snowball into greater problems. We also want to keep our systems bright and shining to take pride in how well you can get your airport operating. It's the first impression that people get about your town when they touch down at your airport. So if somebody's coming in on business and they see some of your lights are out, and then they return for business a couple weeks later and some of the lights are still out, that's something that gets noticed. And just how well you've removed snow in the summer, how well you've upkept all of your grass alongside of your lighting. All things that paint a picture of what your community is about. And we encourage not to set off a chain reaction by ignoring an issue. The human body is a great example of something that if you get a scratch on your arm, a week later, you can't even tell that the scratch was there. But on an electrical system, there aren't many self-healing type systems. So if something starts to fail, it's going to continue to fail, and it might not be the only component that fails. It may cause other things to fail. So something to be aware of. Grumpy pilots equal less business opportunities. If pilots see that repairs are not being made in a timely manner, they may seek the services of a neighboring airport instead of your airport. So that's one set of eyes that's constantly touching down and evaluating and can see if stuff is being well maintained. And pilots, of course, when they get together in the pilot's lounge, they talk about what they've seen and what they are seeing. And how often should we be checking? By having a maintenance program in place with a good calendar, you will be much more successful keeping up with everything. And we want to encourage that you have some sort of calendar reminder on your phone or something to tell you that there are periodical checks that need to happen on some of your more technical lighting systems, such as PAPIs for one, and also those approach lighting systems. We're going to go through some of that here coming up. So lighting maintenance plan, good tool that we can use to assess the status of our lighting system, determine if we are still meeting the design standards, keep up with our lighting system maintenance before surprises cause shutdowns and costly repairs. And a well-maintained lighting system will save you money by helping to avoid surprises. You'll know how much you save the first time a contractor comes out and charges big bucks for something that could have been addressed earlier during normal hours. So let's take a look at a few points from the FAA advisory circular, which we will use in kind of designing how we will maintain our airports. So here I've included a chart out of the advisory circular, and it's talking about edge lighting in particular, and what we would want to do on a daily, weekly, monthly, semi-annual, annual, or just unscheduled. Do it when you can do it. But it's important, especially for the landing strip and intermediate airports, that you're going out in your vehicle and checking your lights as often as you can. And when I say as often as you can, not 4 times a day, but try to make it out there daily. If you want to know what's going on and get a pulse for your airport. And a lot of times I imagine that it's easy to come in as an airport manager and jump in the office, fire off 71 emails, and then do some work on something you had going from the day before. But it's important that we get out there and do our checks to know how our systems are working. But you can see that there are certain things that need to be checked monthly, semi-annually, and annually. So those are the big ones. Those are the ones we want to have in our calendar to remind us when we've got to get out and do those things, alignments for your PAPIs and such. And we'll get to those on the next couple slides here. Oh yeah, here we have the reels. So I think they've added a denomination there for bi-monthly. So getting out there and checking these things, and this is all available in this advisory circular up at the top right corner, so that we can see how often we should be looking at this stuff if you want to reference back to this chart later. But it's a good resource for our field staff to know when they need to get out there and do certain tasks. And then the last chart here is just showing the PAPIs. And if you take notice to this monthly and look how many X's there are of things that we should be doing monthly on these things. I know that people aren't trudging out into the deep snowbanks to do some of this stuff in the dead of winter. But this is what the advisory circular is telling us, and how often that we should be out there addressing these things. Okay, so you are out on an inspection and you find something that's broke. Do you have a broken component? Is there something more serious going on? What needs to happen? Make sure to notate your repairs in the logbook to track work performed. And this is paramount in isolating repeat problems that may become more of a sign of something more major that's happening. So if you don't record what you're doing out there for your repairs on your airport, you might have a component fail and think, I just changed that last month, or I just changed that last week. What's going on? And then you look back on your chart to see how long ago you fixed it, and you have nothing marked down. And it's hard to isolate. You have to take good records so you can tell how your system is performing over time, and if you have a repeat problem. We don't know if a larger problem is looming due to a failing section of the system. And of course, you airport managers out there can reach out to us if you need help. From a pilot's perspective, though, you're going to get in touch with that airport manager to report anything that looks out of ordinary. And the airport manager can then use their staff to take a look at things and call in a local contractor or a airfield contractor specific if they have a problem that is beyond the scope of day-to-day maintenance. I want to look at a note here I had. It says most airports have a technician or airport manager handling bulb replacements on the runway. I mean, we change those bulbs all the time. Please practice safe procedures on this, folks. Series high voltage circuits are no joke. So if there were a fault in that constant current circuit, the loop, the airfield loop, is going to continue to ramp up or increase voltage in order to keep that system running so that it looks consistent at all times. So if there is a connection that's starting to fail, the system's response to that is just to send more electricity. So some of these systems get up in the 1,000, 2,000 and higher voltage going up from there. So treat it with respect and be safe every time. Get in touch with a trained technician. For more technical issues, please notify myself or the nav system team. And how do we get in touch with that nav systems team? Right off the website again here is the links. If you were to click on Aviation A to Z at the aeronautics homepage, you'll see nav systems in there. And here's our contact informations over on the right side. And that's how you would get in touch with my supervisor, Mike Hartel, myself in regards to lighting, and then Chris and John work in the radio and ILS and AWAS type area of the airport. Okay, periodical assessments may help you to avoid, oops, slide jumped ahead. Animals repeatedly chewing on things, trying to make nests, gasket failures, allowing moisture to get into the enclosures. Set aside the time to give a good inspection of your systems. It pays. A few inexpensive repairs can save a lot of money. By staying on top of our maintenance, it can make all the difference in preventing outages. Take the time to maintain your lighting systems and avoid those costly repairs. Long-term outages are especially costly. So if you can imagine a scenario where your PAPI lights, for example, had a component starting to fail in there, it got left unchecked, and in the result, it caused the whole PAPI light can to stop functioning. Well, think of having 4 of those LHA lighthouse assemblies out in your field that are making up your PAPI array. But if that one didn't get the bulb changed in it, or if it had a connection starting to corrode and it caused heat in there and wrecked that one PAPI, that PAPI is going to shut down the rest of your PAPI. So that's one example of why we would want to be staying on top of those outages, or those just generally knowing your system. Okay, one other item here for discussion, those contracts that we are in the efforts of putting together for purchasing. And some of you have already worked with me on ordering material for your airport. There's 2 companies that are already working with us under a purchasing contract, and that is Airport Lighting Company and ADB Safegate. We finally completed those contracts. There's a 3rd airfield supplier that we're working on with, and they have submitted everything to get lined up, and we're in the final stages of getting them into the contract as well. And I'm wondering if this next slide, I believe, talks about why that's good that we have them under contract, but basically it gets us better pricing and availability. So let's take a look at that. Okay, yep, getting closer to fruition. Lock-in competitive pricing is a key factor here. I think we're getting from the first 2 companies, it's 10% below their standard retail is the price break that we're getting. Helps with product consistency across our state airports. I know I've been out to our airports, and there have been some that have spoke about getting their lights off or their bulbs, lamps off of a website or a internet provider company that's, could be from anywhere. And they're introducing, not to say that it's all bad, but they're introducing some lamps that we're not used to seeing out on the airports and may not be in compliance with what the FAA had recommended. So we're trying to get some kind of a standard out there by having parts that are available that we know to work in the field and that meet the requirements of the FAA. Having multiple vendors under contract with the same type of goods will allow us to pick better products and not just lowest priced or whatever's available. So lowest priced. When I see that, I just think of putting out a bid for, or I should say a solicitation, if you're an airport manager and you need something that's more expensive, a new regulator, and you go out to procurement and request pricing back on something. Generally, you're going to take what's lowest priced. Sometimes there are funding requirements and you have to take what's lowest priced. So we're hoping that if we have 5 companies that have regulators, the same regulator for sale, and they're all under contract, we can pick the known one that's best for that type of scenario, and we don't just have to go into the lowest priced scenario, because that can sometimes get us into trouble when we go lowest priced. So we'll definitely be working on that, adding more vendors to this purchasing contract. Here's where I listed Airport Lighting Company and ADB Safegate. And if you are interested in the contact information to get parts from those 2 companies, please just send an email off to me, and I can let you know how to get in touch with those folks so that you are buying parts under the purchasing contract that we have arranged. Excuse me just a moment, take a quick drink here. Okay, here's what I've added. One of the things I've added from last year, and that's just a spotlight. And I wanted to add something to last year's presentation to differentiate it from what we went over before. So this year I chose to take a look at PAPIs. So let's get into it. Most airfield personnel are familiar with the glide slope concept. An aircraft is coming in at a certain angle relative to the ground in order to make its conventional landing. The most common glide slope in Minnesota is 3 degrees, and I believe 3 degrees is the most common everywhere. I just put in Minnesota there because I can speak for Minnesota. You may be wondering why would it be any different than that 3 degrees? And the answer that would be some type of obstruction. Could be trees or bluffs or a tall building that may have been there for a long time. Some examples of some exceptions to that 3 degree glide slope would be Grand Rapids runway 5 is 3.5 degrees, and same with Forest Lake runways 13 and 3.1. Also, there are sometimes temporary changes made to the glide slope for construction operations. Our friends up north in Baudette just completed an international bridge project up there. And they, of course, had cranes on site, which required a temporary rise of the glide slope. This is not a simple matter and requires a lot of paperwork and legwork to make sure that any pilots flying in would have the most updated information possible. So on a scenario like that, quite a bit of pre-work went into pre-planning, went into getting that glide slope temporarily raised, and after the fact, moving it back down to where it was is going to be a bunch more paperwork. So we've just recently got the flight check set up so that we can get that switched back after their bridge construction was completed. Okay, so I know my runway glide slope angle. Now what? Well, let's assume that the set of PAPIs at your airport will be set at the 3 degrees. How do we get them there? Most PAPIs across our state require the use of an alignment tool. There are some newer PAPIs in the marketplace now that don't require a tool because they have fixed digital aiming devices inside of them that can tell you the angle as you're adjusting it. If you're an airport with PAPIs and have misplaced your alignment tool, it's imperative that you procure one. Without your tool, you won't be able to make your own adjustments. And I wrote seasonal in there just because the frost cycles are the most typical factor that kick our lights out of adjustment and require them to be adjusted back. So think of that frost heave coming out in the spring. It's amazing how it can grab concrete cylinders and piers that are drilled 4, 5, 6 feet into the ground and move that whole thing. And when that happens, the alignments that we set up above are no longer compliant. So in the next slide, we'll take a look at a few pictures of these alignment tools. Okay, so we've got some pictures here. So on the top left corner, there is a 4-can PAPI array off to the right-hand side of the runway there. And beneath that is a digital protractor. And what we would do is go to the housing of the first light we're going to adjust and place either that digital protractor or the clinometer, which you would see in the top right picture. And that would be used to set our angles on each one of those 4 cans. And we'll get more into that in following slides. But take notice of this picture with this thumb screw on this clinometer. And if any of you have wrenched on vehicles before and dealt with torque wrenches, that's what I think of when I see this clinometer gauge. So you have the degrees going up and down there on that gauge. And in order to adjust it from 1 to 2 to 3 degrees, you give a full rotation of that thumb screw on the top. And that thumb screw on the top is showing your minutes. And so that's your fine adjustment between degrees. So. Okay, so I've got my alignment tool in hand. We're ready for alignment. What do we need to know? Each tool is designed for a certain brand of PAPI. If you drove 20 miles to the next airport to get theirs because you lost yours, will it work? It's possible that they have the same PAPIs as your airport, but they might not. So how do these PAPI tools disappear? So it can be something as simple and as innocent as the tool getting lost. It could be a contractor that you came out to the airport to make an adjustment for you and they accidentally threw the tool in the back of your truck or in the back of their truck and it went off the airfield with them. There's several different things that can happen. Somebody can retire and they were the only one that knew where the darn thing was sitting on top of a cabinet somewhere. So it's something that you want to be very aware of and keep track of and know where that alignment equipment is at because it's necessary to have, definitely. Verifying the appropriate alignment aiming tool for your PAPIs is just a matter of looking up your manufacturer's instruction manual. If you do not have one, most of the time they can be located on an internet site. If you can get the make and model number off of your nameplate on the light housing itself, you can do an online search. So let's say you're a new airport manager, you've just come out to a site, you have no idea where any alignment tool is, you don't know what brand you've got, no idea where the manuals are. One of those first steps you can do is go out to the lights themselves and see if you can find a nameplate on them, find out what brand you have exactly. And then if you head back to your office, you can download the manual for that. And inside the manual, it's going to talk about what aiming type equipment is going to be required and how to go through the process and the procedure for it. Important to have that manual. Yep, we just went over the procedure part of it. Okay. Common questions. Can I set the tool on the lid for my measuring surface? Well, the answer is no. Between the lid and the can of the light itself, there's a foam or cork gasket, and that foam gasket can be at various stages of wear, or it might be missing altogether. Therefore, the lid cannot be used as an accurate indication of that PAPI angle. So you wouldn't want to just go out there with that digital protractor and set it on the lid and say, oh, I've got my 3 degrees, 10 minutes here, I'm good to go. That's not adequate. The lid has to be removed, and more times than not, there's a specific ledge that sits inside of that light housing. And you can almost see, if you look at that ledge, where the alignment tool, the proper alignment tool, fits right into place. Like two peas in a pod, they were meant for each other. Okay, I have a tool here. I've checked the PAPI. It says my angle is good. Am I done? Well, no, you're not done yet, because you still need to take care of your level or tilt switch. We call it a level switch or a tilt switch. So we'll talk about what that is coming up. What is a tilt switch? Okay, so the easiest way I can explain this is you've all seen a torpedo level with a bubble in the middle, right? So if you put it on a nice flat coffee table, the bubble will probably be close to level. But now if you slide one end of the coffee table off of the carpet and onto the hardwood floor, that level will show that one surface is higher than the other. Well, your tilt switch inside of that PAPI is kind of your watchdog. It's keeping an eye on your PAPI to make sure that the ground hasn't shifted via heaving or frost boils, or maybe it even got bumped by the mower. If something knocks that angle off on the PAPI or knocks it off of its setting, the tilt switch is going to shut that PAPI down to avoid giving faulty information to the pilot. So as my pilot coworkers at aeronautics are always telling me, no information is better than bad information. So the tilt switch shuts us down before it gives the wrong indication of what our glide slope would be if you were a pilot on final. Okay, so there's an angle measurement written inside of my PAPI can. Do I use that angle measurement or the values from the FAA order that I see? Well, you need to use the value that's written inside. And most people would think, oh, I got to follow the order. But that measurement that's inside is almost always the exact angle that was calibrated with commissioning or the last flight check. Sometimes you may also see the angle from the FAA order written inside as a guideline. So it's important to think of that as a calibrated angle if it appears to be an exact angle. So let's say it says 3 degrees, 13 minutes, and your FAA order that you came across said, oh, it's supposed to be 3 degrees, 10 minutes. You got to follow that 3 degrees, 13 minutes because that's what happened. That's the measurement that's sent down to the ground staff when the flight check folks come in and they radio down to the ground staff. And you, as a ground staff personnel, such as myself, I know that I've set the angles appropriately and they should be exactly on. But coming from the airplane with their FAA equipment, they can tell if there are slight deviations from what it should be. And that could be just calibration of instruments or magnetics or whatever you want to call it of the ground instruments. But the flight angle from that aircraft is the true angle that we need to go by, because that's what all the other airplanes are going to be going by as they're making approach on that runway. So they give us the tuned angles, so to speak. And here's a picture of a tilt switch that I found online. It was difficult to find a good one. I wish I had a better one on my phone, but you can see that tilt switch inside of where it's written the words tilt switch on adjustable bracket. Inside of that box is where the tilt switches components are working together to determine if that lighthouse assembly has moved or not, or if it's still as it should be set. So if you were somebody that was working on your alignment and you got your alignment angle set properly on the can, and I said, are we done in my previous slide? This is the last part of that equation where you would zero this out so that it could watchdog your system. So right here, it shows 1.17. Most of the time, what you would do is zero that out so that it could keep a good track on where exactly the angle was. And so that's your watchdog in the system, is that tilt switch. Okay, I got a few more questions here that you might be thinking about. 3 degrees, you say, so I just set all 4 cans at 3 degrees and we're good to go, right? Well, that's not the case. Each can has its own angle. Can 1 is always closest to the runway and is raised at the highest angle. From there, the angle decreases with each subsequent lighthouse, or I should say lighting assembly, each fixture. Where can I get bulbs? My normal source is back ordered. There's about 4 different sources that we normally use in procuring bulbs or anything that you need for this type of light. If you are having trouble getting something, please reach out to me directly and I can help point you to an alternate source. What's the tolerance on the angles according to FAA? Plus or minus 6 minutes would be the answer to that. So if you know your angle or you have your angle inside of your PAPI can, you know where it's supposed to be. The allowance is plus or minus 6 minutes from that. And that's not that much. And I know that you folks are thinking, man, when I get out there with my wrenches and the threaded rods and I'm trying to get it just right, as soon as I tighten the nut down, it throws it 3 more minutes away from where I had wanted to set it. And it's challenging at times and can be a little tricky, but it's really important. Think of it that way. Be patient. Don't go out there in a rush to set your angles. Go out there with the intention of, hey, once I get this done, I don't have to deal with it again for a while, and I want it to be as exact as possible. And then one last item here. Once a tilt switch is set, how much tolerance does the fixture have before shutting down? And I found this interesting. Per FAA, the tilt switch must open if 30 to 60 minutes high. Well, 60 minutes high is a full degree. So I found that to be alarming. I thought that would be a lot tighter tolerance before that tilt switch shuts down that fixture. And of course, when one fixture shuts down because it's in tilt condition, it's going to shut down the other 3 cans alongside of it as part of the PAPI array. So think of it this way. If you have a tilt condition out in the field at your airport, it's probably a bigger deal than what you'd expect. Like, why is the ground moving that much so that it can knock one of my lighthouses or one of my light assemblies off a full degree? But that's just on the high side. On the low side, it's a tighter tolerance. They're more concerned with that PAPI drooping down and giving false information on the low side. But I found that 30 to 60 minutes high an interesting range. I thought it would be a tighter tolerance, being that they want us to be within plus or minus 6 minutes. But then that tilt switch has a lot more tolerance before it has to shut down the lights. So interesting factor. Each manufacturer may differ though. Some of them may have less forgiveness before entering a tilt condition. So this is the maximum allowable, but some of those tilt switches are set a lot more tight of tolerance, a lot closer to that 6 minutes. So it's going to shut your fixture down a lot faster. So that was my PAPI showcase. So wrapping up here, call us. We're here to help. I've got my phone number there. Many of you have it already. It's on the website as well. Michael Hartel is my supervisor, airport operations director. You could call him if you couldn't get a hold of me because I was, let's say, snowshoeing or skiing, anything. State airport coordinators, formerly referred to as our AV reps. We don't have somebody in the North Territory right now. The gentleman, Kyle, that was in that role stepped down to take a pilot job again, I believe. And so Tim in our Central Territory, many of you up in the North are probably getting familiar with him. He's been kind of shifting his territory up north to cover, but we are going to fill that role again for the North Territory. And here I've just got some references, advisory circulars that I pulled information from. There's so much information in those, guys, just looking through them. Some of them are 400 pages long. So if you can't find a reference, if you're curious about something, how to find something, where is this reference, you can always send me an email and I can help snoop around for the information you're looking for. With that, we've wrapped her up. I will see if I can dive into the chat box here in case anybody had anything. Yeah, we got the presentation and presentation handout for those who recently joined. Perfect. So does anybody have anything that they can add or that they're curious about or that they would like to see in another lighting presentation coming up? We are going to be working with Catherine again and are going to be taking place in the MACOA meetings coming up, or I should say taking part, not taking place. So you'll see our smiling faces there as well, and feel free to stop us at any time and chat with us. Ben, you have a question? Go ahead, sir.
Hey, there we go. I was struggling to unmute.
No
Sorry about
problem.
Yeah, I guess if I was an airport manager and I wanted to take advantage of your pre-negotiated rates or through Airport Lighting Company or ADB, is there like a magic word I have to use if I'm ordering through those companies?
Yep. You have to say supercalifragilistic. No, really, it's just a contact thing. So we worked with I think her name is actually Kathy at ADB, and she was really good to help get me back pricing and quotes. And then Airport Lighting Company is less of a single contact, and it's more of a contact dependent on what it is you're looking for. They have more of a quotation system where I send off a request for quote, and then it could be one of 4 or 5 people that taps back to me with that quote, but I just refer to the Minnesota state contract is all it boils down to, and just make sure, hey, do you have me the contract pricing for state of Minnesota? Because we're an airport under the envelope or the umbrella of MnDOT. So that's kind of how that works. But I would say in both cases, if you called up to them and referred to that contract, and I do actually have a contract number for each one of those vendors, and ultimately it would probably be best, I'm going to make a note here to just include that if I can, or have that available so that if airport staff was curious about getting a part quoted, they could just refer to that contract. Then they don't, because if my contact wasn't there that day and you needed the pricing back fast, it would suck to have to dig it all back up again. So I'll do that definitely.
Thanks, Casey.
You bet.
Hey, we have about 3 more minutes. Does anyone else have a last question for Casey? Otherwise, as he mentioned, he will be presenting at the Minnesota 2022 conference. Oh, Nathan, you want to go?
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, okay. I was saying he will be presenting at our Minnesota Airports Conference, which will be held April 6th through the 8th in Rochester. So I'll put a plug in for that. Registration opens mid to late February. So be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, we did record this and we'll be posting on our website. Thank you so much, Casey. That was a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Look forward to seeing you in person.
Absolutely.
I've never seen Casey in person before. So it's a world where you meet people numerous times, really, and then you meet them in person. It's kind of crazy.
Yep. Virtual friendship.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for coming and spending your 9 o'clock hour with us. And with that, I'm going to wish everyone a great day.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.